Welcome at B Building, home of Nalta Explores Internet of Things 2018. Here are some instructions for the conference. Toilets can be found in the back of the lounge. Be careful which door to use, they have humor here at B. Don't smoke inside, but you can smoke outside near the entrance. Put your phone on mute, stow away your laptop, and in case of an emergency, you will find exits at the back of the room. If you're here by car, you will receive a free ticket at the end of the program that you can use directly at the exit of the parking lot. So for now, enjoy the show.
Welcome at Nalta Explores Internet of Things 2018. It's really great to see so many of you here at B Building, the largest startup ecosystem in Europe, and viewers on the YouTube stream. Many of you know us from our Nalta Explores videos. We have online on LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube every week. And we deal about topics like data-driven companies, Internet of Things, customer journeys. And during those interviews, we meet a lot of people, inspiring people with great stories. And we thought, well, let's invite them to the Netherlands. Let's invite them over here in B Building to create a great show. 2 years ago, we organized our first main event, Protecting the Data Lifecycle. And it was also the first time we produced a music album with Airtime and Peterson. And for us, music is a great way to express our creativity and passion for our job. And music is also a great way to tell a story, a narrative about this world of Internet of Things. So today, we present to you a show. And this show is modeled like a vinyl record, like an old cassette with an A and a B side. So the first 45 minutes will delve into the world of IoT from a more technical perspective. And the second part of the show, side B, will delve into the world of IoT from a more people's perspective. And we have a bonus track. Let's say a 12-inch record, this super master track. And that's Andrew Keen, who is going to tell the story of IoT, technology, digital transformation, and our society. These last weeks have been a true roller coaster. And we want to thank all the people and the partners that joined us with all the force that we needed, like Dell EMC, Progress, Sitefinity, Dell Boomi, the people of Nalta, and of course, the speakers for today, Hans, Michael Morton, and Andrew Keen. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our band, the band Airtime. And they composed truly magnificent music on the theme of Internet of Things and People, an album, Internet of People. And they're going to perform this show today for the first time live. On top of that, we asked a lot of international video artists from countries like Sri Lanka, California, US, India, the Netherlands, Italy, to create videos that we will show you on the big screens that accompany the music. And finally, I want to say thank you to Akane Kikuchi, a Japanese art designer we met at South by Southwest earlier this year, who created this magnificent artwork you're seeing in front of you, which is the cover of the album. So, we wish you a great show, a great afternoon on behalf of our partners of Nalta. Nalta Explores Internet of Things.
Welcome, everybody. We are in a very special place here because in 1961, this building was built as a typewriter machine, a typewriter factory for typewriters for IBM. It was built outside Amsterdam. It was just in the middle of nowhere, and as a young child of 6, 7, 8 years old, I saw this building to be built. And it was a revolution in the time. Not only the type machine, the electric type machine that was built, but it was also the factory itself. And we are here now. And you see on the picture, this is the place where we are, in this old factory. And this old factory that was built in 1961, and it was concentrating production from IBM here in the Netherlands. And it was this type machine. And this type machine was a revolution at that time, because it had these typing elements, and you could change, in fact, the letters on top of it. And the other thing was, it was an example in the world of how you build modern factories. So you are a very, very historic place here at this moment. And at the same time, in the States, 1985, we had An Wang. And Wang was building small computers, not the mainframes from IBM, but smaller computers. And he was a Chinese in the States and wanted to show that we can do more as China than just having laundries and having restaurants. And in 1976, in fact, he built the word processor, the Wang word processor. That was a revolution, and in fact, it was the end for this factory, because the word processor was keeping the type machine out of the office. So in this way, in 1990, Wang was worldwide, and a guy came supporting Wang as CEO. And that was Joe Tucci. Joe Tucci was CEO for Wang, and he made Wang an international company with international support. And in 1994, somebody came along by Joe Tucci and said, "Can you help me supporting my small business, Michael Dell?" So Wang became the worldwide maintenance support and supplier for Dell systems. And this strange meeting in 1994 became, in fact, the upside for later in 2016, where Dell and EMC, Joe Tucci went to EMC, shake hands, and Dell EMC was born. So sometimes something happens in the past that defines the future, like this. Another thing is that I started to work in 1985 at Fokker. Fokker was an aircraft manufacturer here near Schiphol. And in 1985, they built all the aircraft, like the Fokker, the F-27 and the F-28. And they decided in that year to build 2 new aircraft, the Fokker 100 and the Fokker 50. And they needed new production plans, and they need modernization of the factories. So in fact, I became responsible for industrial automation for Fokker in 1985. And a few years later also for the CAD/CAM integration. Because we had the first digital transformation that we had in the 80s. We made our factories and our engineering environments digital. We brought systems on the floor, computer systems on the floor. We had PLCs, programmable logic controllers. We had SCADA architectures and software, and we brought that together to automate the workspace on the floor. And we had the integration of how you design and engineer and manufacture products, because we had to simulate how they worked in a virtual world, and we built that. And we had to simulate how we were producing it in those factories. And we connected it with MRP and ERP systems. So, in fact, what happened during that time in the 90s and the 80s was that IoT started to come. And in fact, already in 1966, Carl Steinbuch said, some moment in time, things will be connected. And it started with World Wide Web, the internet that came. You could connect it. And people in universities were playing with it, having a coffee pot on the internet, and from home you could start your coffee process somewhere. And LG made a refrigerator connecting to the internet. And in fact, what happened is that in 2008, there was a conference in Zurich, and for the first time, people discussed about what is IoT and what's going to happen with IoT. And IoT came into our living room with Nest, the Nest thermostat, an intelligent thermostat that could talk with the cloud. 2011, we needed more IP numbers because things were connected to the internet. And in the internet consortium, the Industrial Internet Consortium in 2014, it really started. And they started a project to create a framework how things would communicate with each other. And in fact, 2017 was a kind of tipping point that there were more things on the internet than people. We had this from the consortium, this platform, this framework to connect things together and to talk to them. And we had, last but not least, Edge Foundry, the small sister of Cloud Foundry, to build cloud-based intelligence in small devices at the edge of the infrastructure. So, when we take a look at the universe, then you know we have the sun. The sun brings energy to the space where we live, and we see all the planets there, but there are things that are invisible. We have the electromagnetic force, we have the gravity, we have interaction forces between masses. We don't see them, but they are essential for the life and essential for the way we live. And the nice thing is that when you compare this universe with the digital universe, we have the same. Somewhere we have a source of energy that's giving us fuel, and that's in fact this sun in the universe is data. And this data is bringing us energy everywhere in this universe. And we can see all the things you can touch. You can say, I have search data, I have protection, I can do management of it, monetization of it. But in this universe we also have hidden forces. And those hidden forces are all around us in this universe, like the IoT force. It's coming over us from all sides. We have artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning. That's also coming slowly around us and pushing us forward. We have virtual reality, augmented reality, edge core cloud continuum. We even have now blockchain, quantum computing we talk about. And they all push us and all let us work in a new world, a new digital universe that starts now. And when you take a look at data, the nice thing of data is that it has a changing value over time. When you have just data, just created, it is very valuable. But after minutes, hours, days, weeks, it becomes less valuable. But the other thing is that when I collect data, the value of collected data is growing in the time. And those two things we want to match. Fast data, big data. Because with the big data we create algorithms and we have trends. And with the fast data we know it happens now. Real time. So we want to combine fast data and big data together. And then I can do real-time analytics on collected intelligence. And when I can do that, I have a predictive capability. And that's something we like, not only as people, but also as companies and organizations. I take you in a small journey about this kind of forces in the world of data. And I talk a little bit about data gravity. Data gravity is that data likes to come to each other, just like the apple and the earth. An application needs data to execute, and data needs an application to get more value, to become information and knowledge and wisdom. So when I have a set of data and I have an application with the same amount of data, lines of code, and I just release them, they want to come together. They like each other. They merge. Like yin and yang, they stay together. This was what happened in the mainframe. The mainframe, data, application, everything together, that was living there. But I can do another exercise with it, and I say, okay, I let my application grow. And then my application becomes so big, it becomes unmovable. So when I want to bring data to this application, the data has to be small. Else I can't move the data to the application. So this is typically what we saw when we developed in the client-server environments big applications in the back office. ERP, CRM, that kind of systems were big. They dominated our IT architecture. Small data sets, and the application was very critical about the data that he wanted to have. It should be structured and in strict databases organized. And in that way we built tens of years fantastic applications, back office environments where small data sets were brought to the application. This was an application-centric architecture. The architecture was dominated by the application who made the scene. We can do another exercise and say, okay, we try to grow the data. And when the data grows from a terabyte to a petabyte to an exabyte, it becomes non-movable data, a data lake. So the application should be very small to bring action in this architecture. This is the third platform that we know. Small applications, microservices, and big data lakes. And the data is just there. I'm here, I'm non-structured. Just come to me and find what you need. And the small services should know in that data, where is that data? What do I want to find? What is the trend I'm looking for? These are data-centric architectures, built with another view than an application-centric architecture. And then we can have the fourth example here. We can say we make them both small. And when you make them both small, they are both movable. And when you release them, they both start to move. And you need systems to understand where is my service and where is my data. And that's the Internet of Things, the fourth platform. And when those things shrink, we see that in this Internet of Things we have to find total new ways how we think about the Internet. We come to the edge, it's coming to us. It's coming to us as a human. We can work with it, with somewhere the cloud, somewhere the edge. And the Internet of Things, it brings us on the mobile devices total new opportunities. And with 5G on your antennas, you get a sub-millisecond response from mobile devices, and that brings us in a new era. And this era is different than what we used to have. And in fact, it's a moment that we have new opportunities to build a new world based upon information. But we have to wake before we understand what's happening there.
But you know, I think about this, and what about this internet thing? Do you know anything about that? Sure. What the hell is that exactly? 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 Is that exactly?
Do you like those bleeps?
I do.
Yeah?
I have a question for you, though.
Tell me.
Why is my chair pink?
Yeah. What do you think?
Okay.
Welcome, Michael J. Morton, Del Boomy. So, he flew in yesterday from the United States, straight ahead. And you're now here, our special guest. And my first question for you, and it's a tough one, what's your definition of the Internet of Things?
Okay, first, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
This is great to be here again with you. We've been on stage before, so hopefully a little chemistry shows.
You never know.
You never know what's going to happen. All right, my definition of IoT. You know, it is always a story, of course. It took a little bit of time to figure out what do I think the definition of IoT is. There's lots of definitions out there. It's sort of a nebulous term. A lot of people have their own definition of what IoT is, and typically people immediately launch into devices and thermostats. You know, they seem to want to gravitate towards the device itself. But in my eyes, the device is, it's almost irrelevant. It's not about the device. It's about the data that device produces. That's what IoT is all about. So the definition, my definition of IoT is achieving some outcome because of the device data.
It's almost philosophical. I've spoken with a lot of people during those Nalta Explore series online. We're currently at 20. There are people from Dell, like Jan van 't Klooster. Typically we do those videos in Dutch, so you'll probably not understand what we're talking about. We're talking a lot about
Google to do the translation, so I'm good.
Really?
Yeah.
We're talking about customer journeys and about IoT. And the typical thing is that when you ask the question, you get very different answers.
That's right.
So that's really intriguing. And when listening to the presentation of Hans, he's got his definition.
Yes.
But it translates and mutates back to data. You're responsible within Boomi for all the technical stuff, right?
That's right. Yep.
And you started what year in the company?
I started with Boomi as the CTO in 2013, so about 5.5 years.
Okay.
Yep. It's been a while, and a lot has changed in 5.5 years in regards to IoT. A lot.
So, what are for you the typical changes over these last 5 years?
In regards to IoT, particularly.
Yeah.
Okay. So 5 years ago, people were certainly talking about IoT in a bit of a siloed standpoint, right? Within the past 2 years, I think businesses are finally figuring out how to generate business value from IoT. But what's happening now is it is going to be likely that there'll be no business left on this planet in the next 2 to 3 years that will not be producing or consuming device data, period. In one way or the other. Today, we often think of businesses as integrating business content, business data, right? But absolutely every business will be producing and or consuming device data. I mean, if you think about it, whether because they're the manufacturer of a device or it's information about inventory in a supply chain, right? All of these things are being detected by sensors and devices. So I'm really certain that we're now in this era that integration is no longer just about business content. Integration is about the integration of device data and business data together.
So we're connecting people, machines, tools, apps on a data level, and that's exactly where Boomi fits in, right?
That's exactly right. Yep. So Boomi is the hidden underbelly of integration. People connect today. I mean, if you're connecting through Facebook or Twitter or WhatsApp, right? That's just the interface that's being used for a human to interact with another human. But what's happening under the covers is really data integration. And so we're already seeing this today in Boomi, that we're seeing businesses really quickly transition towards the exchange of device data now.
So we're here on an IoT event. We're exploring IoT. And we want to learn about IoT, set up an IoT strategy, building platforms. What is a good advice with the lessons learned over the past 5 years for our audience? Where do they start?
That's a really good question.
Thank you. We didn't rehearse this one, by the way.
No, this is what he does. He tries to throw me these questions. Where do they start?
Yeah.
It's a very popular question. So here's my advice. What's the problem you want to solve? Don't talk about the device. Don't talk about data. What is the problem that you want to solve? And 90% of the time, I'm just throwing a number out, by the way, just for emphasis, it is going to involve a person. I would challenge anybody, without polling the old, machine to machine, which has been around a long time. That still exists, that's still going to exist. But in the modern era of devices, device data, there is always a person involved. So I'm seeing the most successful examples of IoT be where you're defining what is the interaction with a human in regards to what problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah. In our project, what I found funny is I agree with you on the people's perspective. And we can tell a story about having a business case and start from a business case, an IoT project. But I found extremely cool, and the way we work is extremely useful for that, is looking at your data. We're running projects that we just ask a customer, what data do you collect? We're not only talking about sensor data, but data as a whole. And where is the hidden value to that? And as Boomi is right in the middle of this structure, this piping, like in the opening video, you see the plumbing.
That's right.
That's exactly where Boomi sits.
Yep.
It connects the sensors, the data, data flowing through Boomi to applications and data lakes. What you're seeing from that? Are customers looking from a data perspective to start an IoT project?
I'm going to sadly say yes. A lot of times they are. But it's a learning experience. It's a maturity curve. Eventually you get to the point where you understand that the data feeds it, but we see it all the time. We see it all the time now that when you force someone to think about the problem that you're solving, the discussion of data gets set aside temporarily. Mm-hmm. And that's correct. I mean, that's the right thing to do. And then come back to the data that you need to solve the problem.
We're not using examples right now. In the panels, after us, we have 2 panels planned. We'll drill down into real-world examples of how you actually put the people in center of a solution or the data. So that's.
I can give you an example.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
I'll give you an example that I sometimes use when I have discussions with cities. Okay, everybody's smart city happy right now.
They are.
I guarantee that someone in the audience is working on some smart city initiative, right? But I'm gonna, and by the way, this is even, I want to say not unnatural for me, but I'm the CTO of a company, right? So, I dream bits and bytes. But I also have to think about how to engage in a conversation with a customer. So I would say this about Smarter City. A lot of Smarter City, it's no surprise to anybody. What is Smarter City? What are cities trying to do? Oh, they're trying to save costs. So maybe they're looking into more energy efficient lighting, control lighting. Maybe they're looking at trying to detect sewage spills. And the list goes on and on and on, right? But I look at them and say, why are you telling me about examples that benefit the city and not benefit the citizens?
And what is their reaction?
Oh, that's where they pause, right? Because I say, look, the point is you have to look at this as you're benefiting the citizens of your city first. Mm-hmm. And then you see the wheels start turning. You see that they start thinking like, oh, you know what? You're right. Then you start thinking about the challenges that you need to solve to make it better for your citizens. And then you start thinking about the data you need to collect.
I agree.
So
I couldn't agree more.
That's a different way to look at it that people don't have a natural tendency to do.
But how? Then again, you tell them, they give you your answer,
yep.
And that's not the answer they expect. They probably think you're going to solve their problem, and what you do is ask an additional question.
Right.
What happens in the long run? Because this is a very insightful thing starting an IoT project. We see many fail. Many fail from a minimal viable product point of view. They get to that stage and then it's finished. What is their answer after a week, after 2 weeks, after 3 weeks?
Yeah, it's interesting that you said minimal viable because IoT seems to be an overwhelming concept that customers, everybody wants to gobble all the data first and then figure out what to do second. That's the problem. And it just doesn't work that way.
So basically when they ask you the question, they should have done a little bit more homework before they address the question to you. Is that
well, yes.
Is that the right conclusion?
I kind of feel that way about many things. But yes. Yes.
We have this clock ticking, by the way, and it says 33 seconds.
Yes.
And I came up with this concept a couple of months ago, and I find it very irritating. But it's my fault. It's my fault.
Do I get the last question or not?
Yeah, that's the decentralized one with Tim Berners-Lee in the
okay.
video. You got 80 seconds.
Decentralized. What's the purpose of decentralized? Data privacy? What is it?
It's just a flow. IT is a flow, and this flow of new technology getting old and old technology becoming new, and that's what we're telling basically today. Don't you think?
Our time is up.
Lights out. See you back.
To you the leading experts in the field of IoT, Bob Bogart, Erik Mulder, and Benjamin Vernooy. Good to have you here on stage, guys. Our topic to discuss is what makes an IoT platform. It's an easy to ask, but probably hard to answer. As of last year, there were over 450 IoT platforms in the vendor market, and this could go up to 1,000 platforms soon. So the IT platform is exploding, and with an annual growth of almost 40%, and is expected to surpass the 22 billion by 2023. To start with you, Bob, as an expert on the customer journey, working for Progress Sitefinity, looking from a customer's perspective, which role does a customer experience platform play within an IoT strategy?
Well, if you look at IoT, as we just heard Michael say, it's all about data, right? It's about collecting, connecting, and exchanging data between, on the one hand, the physical world of devices, vehicles, machines, and on the other hand, the computer-based systems to make sense out of that data and to drive a business outcome, as Michael also explained. Business outcome can be cost reduction, efficiency improvements, quality improvements. If we compare that with a modern customer experience platform or content management system like Sitefinity, it's pretty much the same principle. It's about collecting, connecting, exchanging data between people and experiences to drive business outcomes like personalized experiences, higher conversions, deeper customer engagements.
Okay. Question for you, Erik. We work together for Nalta.com. Please hand it over here. Why are we talking about the platform strategy anyway?
Well, there's many ways to look at IoT at different perspectives, but at least from my perspective as a solution architect, IoT is an integration problem. So it's all about integration, and there are no solutions that will ever truly be an island. So from our perspective, yes, all the elements that constitute an IoT solution, whether you go from the sensors to low power wireless networks, whether you go to the gateway, all of that has to be connected and connected into all of your back-end applications. So that's the major point. As Nalta, we are in essence IoT system integrators, and as such, we believe that applications should be uber connected and uber integrated in your entire applications landscape. And that's where the value of platforms such as Dell Boomi come into play. And let me give you a few examples. We have to tie into front-end systems like the customer experience platforms Bob was just telling us about. And that's one area, one category of applications we have to tie in. A second category would be your systems of record. So that could be CRM systems, ERP systems, supply chain, but it could even be one of the current digital ledger technologies that essentially serve the same purpose, recording and processing transactions.
Okay.
A third class of application that we have to tie in is indeed the data repositories your organization has. It could be classical data warehouses, could be data lakes and machine learning platforms, but we have to tie in these as well. And finally, there is the stuff that we would call supporting systems, things about embedding, onboarding sensors, provisioning them, things dealing with authentication, certificates, key management. Well, you get the point.
Yeah.
All of those have to tie in as well in order to arrive at the seamless solution,
Okay.
a platform.
Okay, thanks. Benjamin, Mike and Michael discussed the role of Boomi within IoT. Dell is a market leader in the gateway solutions. You are traveling through Europe, discussing IoT with many customers. What brings Dell technology to the table?
Yeah, Dell Technologies is a set of 7 strategically aligned companies, all centered around this concept of digital transformation. So if you look at an end-to-end IoT solution, you got to do it in a proper way. You got to do it in a scalable way, and you got to make sure you have the concepts aligned around the centered application. So if you take the application, an IoT application, you got Dell EMC and Circle Dell to provide you with the cloud native and cloud central infrastructure. You've got Dell focusing on the endpoints, really up to an end-to-end solution. You got VMware in there, who's obviously focused on virtualization. You can now also virtualize the edge, or how do you containerize the edge, and what do you do with the management aspect of this all? There's so many devices that need to have a proper up-to-spec management layer. And then you got in Dell Technologies also RSA and SecureWorks, taking care of the security aspects of the solution, which is no longer a thing you can bolt on afterwards. You got to integrate this from the beginning. You got VirtuStream in there. It's really a business-to-business, hardened, mission-critical kind of cloud integration. You know, how do you move from your on-prem to off-prem, but do it in a highly managed and secure way? And then at the center of this all, you got your application, and then we bring in Pivotal to make sure you do this in you develop your apps in a cloud-native way, but you also scale down the time it needs to get to the solution.
Thanks. Erik, back to you. How is Nalta's approach to building an IoT platform? What are your considerations?
Well, lots of consideration. First of all, it's about a project. So every project should start with a sound plan, and in our case, that's almost always starts with a workshop where we will discuss strategy, your business model, all the high-level requirements that you may have, and from there on, we will go to a discovery phase where we will detail things like the scope of the project, timelines, milestones, impediments, risks, and finally, but not least important, we will gather user stories, and from those user stories we will derive your functional requirements. That constitutes the first step.
Mm-hmm.
We may introduce further research, or we may even build proof of concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, once that's finished, we will progress to the next stage, and that's the actual solution architecture stage, where we have a number of things to consider. One of the things to consider is, of course, the IoT platform. We already discussed that we have to select, and they may be from Dell Technologies. They may be from Microsoft Azure, but at least we have to select one of these frameworks that will allow us to rapidly build solutions, and on top of that provide a development framework.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we have to go forward.
Running out.
Yeah, so Bob, at Progress, sorry, how do you see customers moving forward to IoT, and how can you help them?
Let me summarize. So to cope with the sheer volumes of data that are coming at us with IoT, everybody would understand you would need armies of data scientists to cope with the data. So for this reason, we believe that the future of business applications and digital experiences will be cognitive first, as we call it. So to build these smart applications and experiences, we've developed kind of a three-layer technology platform, which starts with the bottom layer, if you will, which is connected data. This is used already today by 9 out of the top 10 BI software vendors, as an example. The middle layer is what we call the cognitive cloud. This is a set of cognitive backend services, including cognitive services for predictive maintenance, used by companies like Land Rover, Jaguar, to prevent machine downtime. And the top layer, if you will, are the adaptive experiences, which are used by companies like PMI.com, Aston Martin, or NASA to have adaptable experiences.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Benjamin, for Michael Dell, is IoT one of the top priorities?
Yes.
Tell us what you see coming in the near future.
Well, I guess what we see coming is something that already started now, and you will not be surprised if I say, yes, there's a huge amount of data coming, but it's coming at the field of operation. It is happening where it's being the data is being built at the point of execution, right? And whether that's your coffee machine at home, or a crane in a harbor, or a factory floor, it doesn't really matter. You gotta prepare for this, and this is nothing new. But there's two things happening here. One, we can do a lot more with little, so you can do, I guess, more with scaled down software and scaled down infrastructure, which is good, right? It's good for you guys, it's good for customers, it's good for businesses, but the sheer amount of data that will come, that's really a thing. So you got to prepare, and you've seen it on slides, you've seen it on PowerPoints, you got to prepare for what is coming up. So make sure you got this in mind when you're building the next solution. Be able to scale at the edge, be able to scale at the point of execution. As long as you do that, because nobody knows exactly in 5 years where we want to be, but one thing's for sure, we need to build for real-time runtime applications, and it is happening at the cloud area, but also in the field of operation. So make sure you scale with that in mind.
Thanks, Benjamin. Thanks, Bob. Last question before the break. Eric.
Only a couple of seconds left.
30 seconds. What makes an IoT platform?
IoT platforms are only useful if they start doing things for us they haven't done before. When they interact not just with other things, but also with systems and as well as humans, and that's where the real value of IoT comes in. And it's essentially up to the designers to make the difference.
Okay, thank you, guys.
it is a problem with man that we see here, and all these tools or apps that you see, Facebook, Tinder, and everything, they're just a kind of mask that you're trying to pull off. You know, it's not a reality that you feel. So you in Facebook itself, you see a lot of friends, but who are really your friends? But who are you seem to be connected, but are you really connected to anybody at all? Are you, in fact, even losing that connection that the previous generation had with humanity, with people? I feel that all these things are like a distraction to man. So man has a lot of emptiness in his life, a lot of empty space, empty time that he has, and he's just trying to somehow hide that, and you're somehow trying to fill it with every kind of distraction that he can engage himself in. So yeah, at the end of it all, what have you done with it? What have you gained from it? You know, when somebody tries to do a retrospective on it, then he realizes.
Alexa, how do we make people happy?
Sorry, I don't know how you make people happy.
We're back.
In your pink chair.
In my pink chair.
Did you like it?
I love it. So tell me, first of all, it's a very powerful video that I'm sure everybody, I mean, I watched everybody in the audience, they were just fixated on it. It's interesting how it can be so easy to kind of tax human emotion. So tell me how that video came to be.
It started with technology. Actually, we started apping. We have this idea for song number 6, and you bounced off the idea of putting Alexa, the Amazon device, into the song. And we couldn't find the right way to express this message with only Alexa. So I went into Amsterdam and on a sunny Saturday, and I interviewed 9 people. And one of the interviews landed into the video you just saw, the music you just saw. It was just amazing. And the sad thing is, this is a sad video. You see people become unhappy using technology. And we created this song using technology. That's something strange. And that triggers a question. And that's actually the question we ask in the video to Alexa. How do we make people happy? Could I ask you that question? How does Boomy make people happy?
Oh no, I have a question for you first. Are you and I creating the technology that's making this happen?
I don't know.
By the way, that's an unrehearsed question. I mean, this is what we're doing is completely unrehearsed. So, I mean, we like to challenge each other, but just think about it. Are you and I are we causing this?
I think we're in a flow, and we're finding the right tools and the right people and the right timing to create this video, or to create a platform, or to create something new. We're creating, and that's so cool about today, is that it's we're using technology. Technology in itself is dull, is boring, but when humans contact technology, we create things.
Right.
That's what I like about it.
Okay, so what was your question again, to make sure I get it right?
How do we make people happy with Boomi?
Oh, wait a minute. You
I didn't forget that question.
You changed the question.
No. Come on.
Well, if you leave
Is it a valid question?
No, it's not. You could say, how do we make people happy?
Yeah.
I would say Prozac or a free phone upgrade.
I really believe you can make people happy using Boomi.
Right, look.
Or using any technology.
Everybody laughed, right? Because look at, they were happy over that answer, right? Because,
absolutely,
right?
yeah. You're making fun of me.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I'm not making fun of you. But
I do believe Boomi or whatever technology can make people happy, in contrary to what we saw in the video.
Correct.
And what we've seen in the video is really a problem. When people get addicted to technology, we create platforms that addict people, we create a problem.
Yeah.
On purpose.
It drives an economy. So Boomi cannot solve that problem, right? Boomi is a platform by which others will build solutions to solve that problem. Boomi is all about, it's the plumbing, right? It's the integration of data. So by all means, Boomi can't solve the problem, but it is up to people building solutions to solve the right problems. I mean, they'll use Boomi to do that. But the other thing, as I was sitting here thinking, is I wanted to invoke, you know, some humor into the conversation, because
I see this twinkle in his eyes, and I'm prepared now.
Because the video is really an indication. I think people aren't happy because software and technology is taking away from them. Right? You're giving information about yourself. You're giving insights about you as a human, your buying habits. Why do you need, you know, maybe medication you're buying? It's everything, right? I think a company will be more successful if they're building solutions that return and value to the person itself. So, to me, if you're Nalta and you're building solutions, your motivation's got to be what is the value that you're actually bringing to a person?
To be perfectly honest, at first, no. You want to have a happy customer. That's basically our first goal. Most of the time, those are people too. But you want to have a happy customer. But what we're seeing in the market is this data discussion, and a lot of companies mistrusting or misusing data of others to build business models on top of that. In the end, they will fail. I'm certain about that. And actually, that's a very cool link to the discussion we'll have later on with Andrew Keen. He wrote a whole book on that topic. But getting back to IoT and the people's perspective, I want to repeat the question from the previous discussion we had. Where do you start with this in mind, the video in mind?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a very challenging perspective. And for me, it's a cop-out. I mean, I build the plumbing. It's how people are going to use an integration platform. Like, what data are they going to use? Where are they going to get it from? So,
but you're a great thinker. You've got a lot of integrity. You're in this position for quite some time now. You worked for IBM in the past 20 years. 25 years ago, you started over there, like this building. They were. How can you build a IoT platform with this integrity in mind from a Boomi platform perspective?
God, you keep asking me that question, and I still don't.
I do, yeah.
I still don't have a
I
great...
think it's important because we can discuss everything around IT and how we connect the dots and have data flowing. But if we don't solve that question, we'll have a problem. Probably a problem for the millennials, I hate that word, that we've seen on this screen.
Yeah.
You had a great quote about the millennials not so long ago.
I did. It's sort of philosophical, but you know what's kind of interesting is you asked me about decentralized systems
Yep.
before. Not that my answer is answering going back to that, but what's happening right now is very interesting. So if you think about who is really pushing their agenda on data privacy, it's not the millennial generation. Think about the millennials that grew up in the social app world. I would dare say that many of them don't care about privacy. They don't. They're posting pictures of themselves. They're posting everything, where they're at, what they bought. I mean, absolutely everything. And so we're at this interesting crossroads where the data privacy agenda is being pushed by an older generation and not the millennials. So what's going to happen in the future, right? Is policy going to evolve to the point where we will be protected? Is it too late? But we're at this interesting generational crossroad right now over who owns my data.
For me, the question is, do they don't care, or do they don't, or really don't know?
I think a lot of us would think that millennials are naive. I mean, just because, I think an older generation always believes, that as a general, reaction to...
The parents in the
I'm
50s
I'm
hated
older
rock and roll.
I'm older and
Yeah.
wiser.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm in the over 50 crowd, so I don't even give my real name at Starbucks. I mean, I don't want someone to shout out my name. I mean, so I'm of the camp that I think it's ridiculous how much information about me is in public domain. And that's what makes me unhappy and sad. I don't want people to know. I'm a private person, actually.
The next clip and the next song is the song Humane. And I'm gonna ask the question. Because I'm so intrigued that we are capable of building IoT platforms or IT platforms from a people's perspective. So how, and this is a difficult question. Should I pause?
No, you have 2 minutes left.
How can Boomi and IoT and we actually help humanity? How can we do that? We are in control. We have here programmers, business owners, marketing guys, research and development, all kind of people.
Produce something that impacts their life. Really. Produce something that makes their life better.
You had this great example, was in the Wall Street Journal, the retailer that uses blockchain and actually tells their partners to use their technology to improve this cycle of the food chain.
Yep.
Is that a way that we can improve humanity?
It's very interesting that you say that, because I'm going to go right back to our first conversation about people not realizing the perspective, okay? So, yes, indeed, there's a well-known giant retailer that is forcing their customers to interact with their blockchain and their produce suppliers. The reason why they're forcing them to do that is to protect the food supply chain, to prevent illness and sickness, is track the genuine lineage of food in the food supply chain. Now, of course, we can just push aside, do you need blockchain for this, right? I mean, that's always the debate. But what's interesting is every article you read, what are you reading? Retailer X is mandating their customers. What a wrong title. Completely wrong. Completely and utterly wrong. What it should say is giant retailer leveraging blockchain to protect people. Right? See the difference?
I like it.
That's what it should say. But yet we're in this society where it's all about, we're mandating, our producers, and it still boggles my mind that somebody, of all the journalists that have written about this story, and there's many now, page after page, not one of them says in their headline, we're doing it to protect people from illness.
I love it, Michael.
Yep.
Thank you.
Na zoveel triest, after so much sounds, bad sounds, that's what's happening with technology. In fact, we are at a moment in time that we have the dawn of a new era. And like I told you before, we created the clouds, the central cloud, big data environments, but we now get federation of the clouds. We started in the time of IBM with the mainframe. In the 60s, the terminal, that you looked inside the mainframe, the application data was there. It was a central place, hardware and software were connected. And then in the 80s we got the mini computer, Mr. Wang, Mr. Dell, they started to build the client-server environment. Local situations, smart devices, the desktop, the laptop came, but it was a closed source. It was software, hardware connected to each other. And the internet came in the 90s, and it gave us the chance to create services. Instead of using products, we use a service. And we built the mainframe of the internet, and we called it the cloud. And in fact, the cloud is the mainframe of the internet, and we're working again with terminals, browsers. And we take a look at what's happening in this cloud, application and data all together. And that's where we see what something happens. And now we're at the moment that this cloud is coming down to the earth. It becomes a fog or a mist. It becomes edge intelligence. We can use the cloud model, as we used it many, many years now, as an open source world for services. And one of the things that I told you about the big applications, they will be around for the next 10, 20, 40 years. But we also have the big data, we have the fast data at the edge. And we have the deep learning that we need, and we need clouds for that. We need a lot of data to deep learning. We have fast environments where we can do machine learning and experiencing. And when the market of the mainframe was won, the market of the client server was 1,000 times bigger. And the cloud is even 1,000 times bigger again But when we take a look to the edge, it's even 1,000 times bigger. So this is where it will happen the next 10 to 20 years regarding to growth. So with this federation of the clouds, we learned the last 10, 15 years using the clouds and everything as a service. And we did it with the hardware. We collected the hardware, the housing, the hardware, the networks, and we virtualized it and brought infrastructure as a service with the cloud operation model, scalable. And on top of that, we have platforms where we can do analytics, where we can build software, where we can manage the operations. And from there, we can in fact send services to people who can use them. Software as a service. But on top of that, we need a kind of umbrella that is saying QAS, quality as a service. We want to use it for a certain kind of quality. And that's including security. We want to define from the top to the bottom how we want to use all this kind of wonderful cloud technologies. So we have an integrated design at the top and we go down. When I go back to the aircraft industry, that's how we design aircraft. We have functions, we say we want to have it fail safe, we want to have security, and from that we are designing the infrastructure that we need. So we can use the cloud model, and we have to use it in a federated way. We have to use it somewhere at the edge, and we have to use it somewhere in the central clouds, and perhaps we have to use it also somewhere between it. And that's possible because the future is federated. It's not one solution. It is and. It's everything together. And our challenge is that what we are doing there in the middle, having the big data for deep learning, having the machine learning, the fast data, and doing some smart things in the middle around the people, about the man-machine interface we have. So when we talk about the edge, the core, the clouds, and everybody knows what's cloud computing. And it's when we pull insights from the cloud to this core where we are, and we have insights from the edge, what's happening. And the NIST, the National Institute for Technology, Standards and Technology, last year defined we have cloud computing, we have fog computing, and we have mist computing. The fog is in the clouds, it's landed on Earth again, around us, and mist is something on the ground. And in the edge, we can use the same levels of architecture we use as IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, QaaS, but also for the core and also for the cloud. Why not? We can use it. And in fact, what we are building is the cloud is big data centers, mega data centers, and at the front end we have nano data centers, very small ones, perhaps in things and near things. And that's what's happening. And in the middle we are, as man-machine, in the interface doing things together, getting signals from the edge, getting insights from the big data environments, and use that to improve our world. So when you take a look to what's happening now, we see that next to public clouds, we see industrial clouds coming up, closed clouds, where we say not everybody is allowed to be there. And we see nodes and sensors and data that's somewhere together. And it's in a data zone, it's locked. It could be files from a patient. It could be some machines in a factory that working together, and the data is there at that place. And we want to have possibilities to talk with this kind of nodes that know what data is there, and that data is not supposed to move. It's there in a locked zone. It's not allowed to move. We don't want to move it, but we want to know with some intelligence what's happening there around that data. What is the status? Can you give a signal if something happens? And those nodes will grow and will connect perhaps three cars that are driving together and have to talk on the street to each other. So we need also communication between those locked data zones. So we have to build software to do that, open source software, and this is growing and growing and growing. And we even can't control this anymore because it's worldwide, and we don't know which sensors and nodes are talking to each other and what they're talking about. It's something we programmed it, but we can't see everything. It's a dynamic environment where data centers are and sometimes cloud environments are. And in fact, it's the world around us that's working like this. This is the edge where we live in. And this is a kind of IoT mist. We don't see what kind of communication is happening there below the surface. So we have master data management tools and techniques to get this mist away and to translate this architecture, this infrastructure, into a repository with metadata. Knowing real time what data is where and what is the status. And we can do that. And when I have that metadata in a repository and somewhere in a data center I want to do some research about a medicine that's used by 150 hospitals and 1,000 patients in some cancer treatment, I want to know where are those patients, because the data is not allowed to move out of the patient file. It has to stay in the hospital, but I want to know how this patient is reacting on his medicine. So what I want to do, I want to know where is those data sources, where are those files from those patients. And then I can build an analytic engine and say I have a microservice and with a backpack, and in the backpack I have some analytics, and I say to the service, go find the data. This is the postcode. This is where you have to go to. And when you have found the blood level for the patient at this day, come back and tell the researcher what you found. So after some time, when those data sources are visited, they come back and they bring to this central data center the analytic results. And in this way we can work in a very private way with very sensitive data. We have this technology already, it's working at this moment, and we brought some compliance to it. But we not only said, this is what you can do in Japan when you go to an hospital, and this is what you can do in Singapore, and this in Germany, and this in the UK. And when you come back, just write down what you have done, that we can afterwards say you were compliant in your analytics activity. So we are building worldwide integrated open source, integrated PaaS platforms, a wonderful word. But in fact what we do with metadata is that we have Boomi as the admin, knowing what's where. We have RSA Archer, governance, risk and compliance software to know what is allowed and what have you done. And we have intelligence with worldwide Hadoop kind of intelligence services we can bring out over the world. And in this workbench I can go to any infrastructure as a service where some data is that might be interesting for me. And I have a kind of ODA circle where I say I observe, I orient, I decide and I act. And at that moment from act I can send a service around the world to a place where users are and they can use it. And I can know for sure that it is just built a use case with a single view for that thing that we wanted. And in fact, what we want to do is to design an integrated design from the top to the bottom, quality as a service, and defining what do you want us to allow when we have this service there and there at that place doing this thing. So we have the information and we have the technology to build a new world. And one of the things that I want to tell you at the end is that we see a convergence of the physical and the digital worlds. And I told you that in the time I worked at Fokker Aircraft, we worked with CAD systems, computer-aided design, and we made computer-aided engineering. We made a virtual world already with those systems from the physical world. And we had product lifecycle management to understand how it was in the time that we created that data. We had this digital twin. And now with IoT, we have the ability to bring real-time dynamics to this virtual world. And that's interesting. And the best thing is that we can even bring it back with augmented reality or virtual reality. We can bring it to the people in this real world, and we can combine the physical world and the virtual world together. So by doing this, we get whole new ideas about how we can work with data in different countries, in different areas. Some data that is allowed to be in this country, but I want to support somebody in another country where it is not allowed to bring the data to, but I can give them the vision by augmented reality. So we are going to a new world, and we as Dell Technologies are building all kinds of technology. And technology is open and is independent, and you can do good things and bad things with technology. And we think that we should use this technology, and as governments say, we want to make rules how we use the technology. So also like the past, I think that we as society have to define how do we want to use the technology. And at that moment, we have the Internet of People.
So it's really my privilege having 3 CEOs looking at the well-being of human. And we just saw the first clip after the break about the loneliness of the people of technology. And I have 3 CEOs just trying to take care of those things. To my left is Peter from Digital Angel, Janneke in the middle from Trilykes, and to my right, or other left, is Paul from Datumprikker. And Janneke, could you share with us what's your vision on human from your solution?
Sure. So our solution, Trilykes, it's basically all about human, right? So in the physical space, I guess what we measure most of the time are hard metrics like footfall, how many people exit, queues at cash registers, right? If desks are occupied in offices. So in stores, in hospital, we measure hard metrics. But what about the emotion of the people actually in the experience? What about the perception of both employees and customers? And that's where Trilykes comes in. That's the data we gather. So we indeed made carriers. I think they're rather cool carriers. So I'll show it. It's a feedback button, basically.
Love it, right? You can't miss that one.
Yeah, it's very simple, but I guess through these data carriers, we gather perception data and give that back in real time. And
hold on to that one, right? Because there's more questions coming up for those things. So
sure.
Just bear with me for a second, right? So Paul, from your perspective, from Datumprikker's perspective, what's your vision?
I think it's in a world where all things go really fast, it's sometimes good to just stand still. And what's a better way to do that than have quality time with family, friends, colleagues? Those moments really matter, right? So with Datumprikker, we help people to plan or take the initiative to plan a group event. Because the lower the barrier is, the more quality moments take place.
Thank you. And Peter, what's from your perspective?
Well, my perspective is Digital Angel perspective. And what we do at Digital Angel is that we improve the quality of life of patients and the well-being of caregivers. And we do that by connecting smart healthcare products like mattresses, like beds, wheelchairs to our platform. And within the platform we translated all the generated data to information that we transport via different user interfaces that are based on the needs within the healthcare market.
All right. So what if we would combine IoT healthcare connected devices? How much would it add to the benefit of human well-being?
A lot.
Could you give us an example?
Yeah. Well, we've in the past year we've done some research, and what we've experienced is that the average care home uses 5 different IoT-related products or healthcare products. And you have to imagine that a caregiver, when he or she does perform his work or job, you have to swipe between different apps because each product has an app. And what we're capable of is combining all those data streams by connecting those products to our platform and reporting all those data streams into information on one user interface. And that's a big advantage for the user and also for the client. If I have an example of a proposition where you combine different products.
A quick one,
yeah. If you combine, for example, the data of a smart mattress together with a wheelchair and from a decubitus, so pressure wounds, together, you can get a 24-hour measurement. And based on that, you can imagine what that means for patients. So
wow,
if you can prevent it.
That's pretty impressive, right? It really starts to make people happy again. Could you pass it on to Paul, please? Paul, could you please explain how Datumprikker or Kelly, right, international, brings men together?
Yeah, sure. I think the cool thing about Datumprikker and also Kelly indeed is that it automatically brings people together. Because when you want to plan quality time with a group and you want anyone to be there, you need to find a date where when everybody can be there. So I think Nalta did a great job by founding Datumprikker already 18 years ago, because that's why it brings a lot of people together. This year alone, there will be 15 million quality moments this year alone. So I think that's absolutely a lot.
It's impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the next step, we have the opportunity to have the group together online, and I think that's
next step, right? So
yeah,
I'll
okay.
keep them in that mind. I'll remind that one.
Yeah.
Janneke, from your perspective, right? Look, you just showed us the button, right? So pressing that button is easy. You just click on it and you got it, right? But how will the individual experience a better well-being?
Sure. So pressing a button is easy. That's why we gather so much data in such a short notice. So
Sure.
so that makes it cool. But I think it's two ways you can look at it. First is by pressing a button and actually giving your feedback. It enlightens a certain part of our brain, right? Because you can actually release your expression about that certain experience, whether it was very frustrating or very happy. So you get rid of that feeling and can go on to the next part of the
It's
experience.
like so I really said, bang, I hate it.
Exactly.
And do you measure that pressure as well or not?
We can, yeah.
That's interesting.
But it's not something we take
Okay.
into account at this moment. But the other way is, of course, when a company takes our data into account and actually we give them very readable and easy to use metrics to improve certain parts of that experience, that the experience actually gets better, right? So the toilet at a restaurant gets clean better and the cash register line gets shorter and stuff like that.
Okay.
So basically that, makes your experience as a consumer or your experience as an employee makes it better.
Yeah, so by taking the action to press the button, my life improves.
Yeah, well,
Short set.
that's the first, and the second one is that your life improves because the company that gets the data improves their services towards you.
Interesting. So Paul, back to you, right? Because you started to mention already a little bit about things you would like to share with us. So can you continue on that?
Yes, I see two great opportunities for us because we have the group together, and I would like to make them more interact together. Just before the event, but also maybe after the event, share pictures or notes or other things regarding the meeting. And the other thing I would like to do is give our users more inspiration. One of my personal favorite things we can implement, and hopefully we will implement, is the new bucket list category. So full with cool things you can do with your family, friends or colleagues. And I think that's also a nice way to bring people together to do cool stuff which can be on a bucket list.
Nice. We'd like to have that bucket list, right? Really cool. And share that with other people as well. And don't forget the GDPR and all that kind of stuff, right? It would be fun to have a bucket list with people sharing the bucket list and they do them together.
Sounds
Wouldn't
like
that be great?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're gonna start with creating content, but that could definitely something we.
I opt for the whiskey tasting, but that's a different story.
Okay, sounds good.
So yeah, back to you, Janneke. I'll finish with you, Peter, because you got a brilliant question to come, right? So, oh yeah, you get better be warned for that one. No, you can't. She only has the like button with her, with the heart, right?
The love, actually.
Trilex captures the emotions of a man, but how do you know what to measure?
It depends very much on the vertical you're in, the KPIs you want to measure. So we basically look at the experience, whether it's for employees or for customers, and we say, okay, there are certain spots within that experience that you want to measure in terms of employees being friendly towards customers, speed at certain points, or other pain points, basically. And then we think of specific questions to tackle that problem and specific icons to cope with that. So to give you a very quick example, you see a lot of those smiley faces at toilets in airports, but a smiley face doesn't tell me anything about that toilet. So what we do is we make icons that say it's dirty, out of toilet paper, out of soap, or stuff that really...
Smelly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's simple, but it's effective because cleaning staff directly knows what problem to fix. Basically.
Actually, by providing more choices for that individual.
And more specific ones.
Yeah, more specific ones. You have more detailed information, therefore you can take appropriate action and make life better.
Exactly, yeah, as simple as that.
Interesting. Peter, here you come, right? There you go. Do you see a role in artificial intelligence for the platform you have?
In fact, what we when we started the company Digital Angel, is one of the goals to do with all the generated data is that the different products can talk to each other. It's a simple explanation like that. But you imagine when people suffer from dementia. They are sleeping in a bed, and based on the data and based on the data pattern that is within the platform available, you can see if a person sleeps really restlessly or very quiet. And when you see people sleeping restlessly, based on a pattern, you can adapt the headrest, for example, of a bed to with, for example, 3 degrees, because the pattern of the data says if the headrest is moved, I will sleep very quietly and very peacefully. So, from a point of view of improving the quality of life, that's the real one.
So it's really interesting, right? So I you know, Recording-Nalta bring people together, right, and technology together, and that's why we're here today. But you all three have amazing technologies in your own perception, your own specific market. But what if we combine your 3 technologies? You know, so it's, my grandmom is in the hospital, right, and she didn't sleep well. At least that's what your data says, Peter. And then then she wakes up and she bangs on the button, I'm happy. Thanks, Trilux. I'm really happy, right? And that triggers an email to my dating pricker. Pricker, not pricker, that's stupid me, but pricker. And that tells me, hey, you know, grandmama's happy today, whose point is it to go today? Yo, it's your turn, it's my turn, I will go. And then I'll pick up my grandmom in the wheelchair, and you'll measure the postures and the happiness of my grandma. I mean, wouldn't that be great as an example how 3 of your technologies each individually provide a better well-being for humans than just being alone? And with that, thank you very much for your answers.
Going now? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, I've never given a speech in a massage parlor before, but It's always the first time for everything. It's very dark in here. Is this how technologists work, in the dark? Can we put some lights on, or candlelight? No? Okay, well, I'll try and enlighten you. That was my little joke here. I'm sure I understand most of you are tech people, so I don't know whether you've read Plato's book, The Republic, in which the key scene, if you like, is where Socrates is describing truth, and he says truth is like in a cave where you everything is dark, and you look at what you see in the light, but it's actually a reflection. So what you're looking at is actually lies. So hopefully I can be a little bit more honest than that. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with my work. I'm a writer, amongst other things. I've written 4 books, all of which are designed to enlighten, to wake you up, to put the lights on, because my feeling is that maybe we do indeed live in a cave. And they've stopped the music, which I'm pleased, because not only is it dark, but the music is supposed to maybe, I don't know, put you to sleep or make you think of other things. So my work is designed to wake you up, put the lights on, stop the music, stop the good feeling. Oh, good, you see the lights have come on. And I can look at you now, and you can look at me. So my work is about actually telling the truth rather than falling into these traps of what I called originally seductions around technology, believing things that aren't true, sometimes children's stories, although not all great seductions are children's stories. Sometimes they're stories told by adults for other adults. We've heard about, and I've been here an hour, so I heard some of the previous presentations. What I sense about all the previous presentations, we're on the verge of the new thing. We're always on the verge of the new thing in Silicon Valley or in tech. And the new thing is the Internet of Things, of course. I know Nalta is an Internet of Things platform or company, and many of you are in the IoT space. That, of course, is the new thing. Smart machines connected. Smart machines that will create again, I say rather satirically, a brave new world of smart connected devices where everything speaks to everything else, whether it's the Diet Coke in my glass, whether it's this, whether it's this, whether it's my clothes, whether it's chips embedded into ourselves. We're all part of this new IoT world. The promise, of course, and I heard it, I think, in the previous presentations. The promise is that the Internet of Things will liberate people. The promise is, and the promise is that the Internet of Things will finally release human beings. We heard it with those 3 entrepreneurs. In spite of this being an IoT event, they're all about liberating people. They're all about bringing out our, and I quote unquote, our humanness, our humanity. This new wave of technology is supposed to enable us to become truer to ourselves, to become more human. In my last book, How to Fix the Future, I suggest that humanity, we know this term trending, everything trends on Twitter and on Facebook and on social media, but the thing that is trending most of all in tech is humanity, or at least the idea of humanity, the promise of humanity. Now, my business has historically been in bursting and bubbles, in bursting these kind of illusions. I think maybe humanity is possible. Maybe this new technology can enable a better world, a fairer world, a freer world, a more human world. But it's certainly not going to happen automatically, and we all need to work on it. As I said, my previous work has been focused on enlightening, in turning the lights on, in revealing what's really going on. In 2007, at the height of the Web 2.0 mania, I wrote a book called Cult of the Amateur, which was a critique of democratized media. You remember, most of you will remember back in the back in 2005, 2006, people were talking extremely optimistically about the democratization of media. They said if everyone could express themselves, the old hierarchies in the media world would be done away with, that everyone would have a voice, our culture would be richer, more honest, we wouldn't have the old elites controlling the conversation and the discourse. And it was supposed through these so-called free platforms, 2006, Facebook was just beginning, YouTube was just beginning, Google was already the dominant Web 2.0 company. It was promised that these platforms would be a good thing. Now, everyone was saying it was a good thing. There was a kind of mania. The idea that old media was going to be swept away, whether it was the music business or the newspaper business or the movie business or the publishing business. All these old media businesses were supposedly controlled and created by and for elites, and the people wouldn't have a voice. In 2007, I wrote a book called Cult of the Amateur, which actually challenged that idea, that suggested that if you have these open platforms, actually the reverse was true. You would have the corrosion of culture and the undermining of truth. That if you did away with curation, if you do away with editors, if you did away with fact finders, if everything became like Wikipedia or YouTube, then truth itself would be undermined, and actually you were jeopardizing democracy and jeopardizing the vitality and coherence of our culture. Now, when I wrote that in 2007, I was accused of being an elitist, of out of touch, and I was in a very small minority of people who were challenging Web 2.0. Today, of course, given Trump, given Brexit, given the way in which Putin's trolls in St. Petersburg and Moscow are almost now openly undermining Western democracy and Western institutions, my argument about doing away with curators and gatekeepers has more legitimacy. In 2012, I wrote a book called The Internet is Not the Answer. Now, one of the previous speeches talked about the future being federated, that the new world, in this new world, technology is open. This is, again, one of the great delusions, I think, of the tech world, particularly of Silicon Valley, but also in Europe. Less in Europe, but certainly this is an argument, one might even call it an ideology, that's very comfortable in Silicon Valley, that technology, and especially the internet, is an open kind of distribution. The internet is fragmented and distributed, does away with the center, does away with hierarchies. But in 2015, I wrote a book called The Internet is Not the Answer, which again, I wasn't necessarily the first person to be saying this, but I think I probably said it a little bit more aggressively and vulgarly than other people were saying it, that actually the technology world was not creating more equality, more opportunity. It was actually creating a winner-take-all economy. So the future wasn't actually federated. It was the reverse of federation. The future, at least in 2015, and perhaps even more so today, is centralized. The future is controlled by a tiny group of technologists and companies. It's a winner-take-all, and this isn't a reflection necessarily of people or bad companies. It's simply a consequence of what many people call the network effect. Then in a perfectly free, open market, a tiny group of companies win. So you have Google dominant in search. You have Amazon dominant in e-commerce. You have Facebook dominant in social. You have Apple dominant in devices. And of course, these companies now are the first trillion-dollar companies. The five tech giants of Silicon Valley and of Seattle now are the 5 wealthiest companies in the world. So what I argued in The Internet is Not the Answer in 2015 is that the future actually isn't federated. It's the reverse. It's centralized. What technology is doing is enabling new kinds of monopolies, new kinds of dominant, massive multinational companies. Multinational companies in their power, in their financial might, have barely existed before in history. They've also created huge amounts of concentrated wealth. We were promised in the early days that the internet would distribute wealth, that the digital revolution would enable more people to have more access to money, would be a fairer, better, more democratized economic system. But of course, the reverse is true. As I said in my book 2015, The Internet's Not the Answer. Today we have one single individual, Jeff Bezos, who is not only the richest man in the world, depending what Amazon stock happens to be on a particular day, but the richest man in history. Is worth now around $150 billion. And when you put these, I argue in the book, when you put 9 of the wealthiest Silicon Valley multi-billionaires, when you put their money together, they're worth collectively about 25% of the entire planet. So you have an astonishing reverse of the formal ideology of the tech community, that technology is democratizing, that technology is fairer, that technology is better. The same is, of course, true of jobs. Technology was supposed to create more jobs, but it's becoming increasingly self-evident that whilst it's creating some jobs, these trillion-dollar companies are barely employing people, certainly when you compare them to the old industrial giants. And indeed, the kinds of jobs that these companies are creating, especially in the so-called sharing economy, are creating a new social class, the precariat, people who are employed precariously, driving their Uber cars, or renting out their spare rooms on Airbnb, or doing other people's tasks on TaskRabbit. So labor is changing. And of course, the great challenge on the horizon, which you're all familiar with, which is part of the IoT revolution, is the emergence of smart machines, whether they're networked or not. All smart machines are by definition networked. Smart machines that will take away everybody's jobs. It's one thing to have self-driving cars, which of course in some ways intellectually and aesthetically are quite exciting. It's quite another when you realize that I think it's 15 to 20% of male jobs are bound up in the driving business, whether it's lorries or taxis. We already know that, white men vote badly, they vote for Trump, so God knows how they're going to vote or behave when they lose their jobs entirely. Economists mostly agree with this. A couple of Oxford economists came out with a much-cited report 2 or 3 years ago saying that 47% of people would lose their jobs in the next 5 or 10 years. Now they come up with 47%. Obviously, that's an absurd number. But everybody knows that the smart technology, the network technology, is challenging work. Not only menial work like drivers, like fast food workers, but also lawyers and doctors, because the smart algorithm doesn't just stop at driving cars. It's bound up in figuring out the law much more effectively than lawyers, figuring out medicine and disease much more effectively than doctors. The algorithm can build bridges much quicker than physical engineers, and of course can do software much quicker than any of you. So the real challenge on the horizon is profound joblessness, massive unemployment, unemployment perhaps which our species has never experienced before. So things are pretty bad, actually. Unemployment, inequality, cultural decay. Someone mentioned earlier in the panel happiness, that all this, well, okay, we're all going to be out of work, everyone's going to be unequal, most people will be really poor, they'll be surrounded by lies, but at least we'll be happy. And of course, we're not happy. Happiness is, to quote a song, is a delusion. In 2012, I wrote a book called Digital Vertigo. It was a remix of Hitchcock's movie, Vertigo, his famous 1956 film, which was filmed in San Francisco. Hope you have seen it. If you haven't, you have an obligation as a human being to see it. It's the greatest movie ever made. It's about a man who falls in love with a blonde who doesn't really exist. And it's again about delusion and waking up and turning on the lights and enlightenment. In Digital Vertigo, 2012, which was pretty early actually in retrospect, in 2012 in Digital Vertigo, I took on Zuckerberg and social media and suggested that actually social media, this thing that was supposed to be bringing us together, making us less lonely, doing away with atomization and loneliness and isolation, was actually doing the reverse. What I argued in 2012 was that social media was actually antisocial, that it was driving us into our machines. I saw some of you earlier looking at your little devices, communicating with your devices, and that's exactly not only what social media, but the technology revolution was doing. Isolating, fragmenting, undermining society, undermining community. And of course, more and more reports support the argument that I was making in 2012. It's becoming increasingly clear that this technology is indeed making us lonelier, is indeed compounding our unhappiness. Someone mentioned the millennials earlier. One of the interesting stats to come out about the millennials is that they're unhappier, certainly than my generation. And the reason for that, again, is all this technology. And much of the research suggests that the reason why they're unhappy is because they're so locked to their devices and they're so intoxicated, indeed addicted to their devices. So technology is the new addiction. Much, much more dangerous, much more addictive than fast food or tobacco or marijuana or even heroin. And more books have been written about this. So these 3 books, I wasn't necessarily the only person arguing this, but I like to think that this trilogy of books, Cult of the Amateur, Digital Vertigo, and The Internet is Not the Answer, that this trilogy of books was, of course, extremely miserable, but pointed out all the problems. Today, as I said, people are coming around, more and more books are coming out, which are echoing many of my arguments, not just my arguments, but other people's arguments as well, about this technology isolating us, about creating more unemployment, about inequality, about the increasing winner-take-all power of these massive platforms, these dominant platforms that actually are not encouraging innovation, are actually stamping out innovation. So having written my 3 books, I figured, well, I'm not going to write a 4th. I've already written 3 miserable books. And whilst everyone else, of course, was being pessimistic, and I decided, well, I should be a little bit more optimistic. So my last book, which came out earlier this year, is called How to Fix the Future. Nice, modest title. And what I address in this book is how do indeed, we've been through this too many times. You know, I think it was Einstein who says, you know, when you try and fix something once, you're sane, but if you keep on trying to fix the same thing without rethinking stuff, then you really are insane. And I've been through these cycles too many times as a relative veteran, a former entrepreneur back in the mid-90s, been through all these booms and busts over the last 25 years in Silicon Valley. What do we do differently now? How can we make sure that the IoT revolution, which is true and real, I'm not suggesting that it's delusional, that it's not really happening. How can we try to make sure that this new wave of innovation, call it IoT, call it AI, there are all sorts of terms to describe what's happening, but we know it's real and we know it's going to change the world perhaps more dramatically than anything before that's happened over the last 30 years. The rise of the dominant algorithm. How can we try to make sure that we don't keep on falling into the same trap of talking about the future as being federated, of fetishizing technology because it's open, of idealizing this convergence of the physical and then digital and celebrating the ubiquity of tech, and then turning around 5 minutes later and realizing that we've all been fucked, to put it in Digital Vertigo terms, or maybe not fucked, unfortunately, At least we could get something out of it. So how do we address this? How do we really now focus on fixing the future? How can we make sure that the technology that we are all collectively building, how can we, and this is a central question, we're not in a ghetto anymore, we're not marginal, we're the center of things. Pick up any newspaper any day of the week and every headline will be about tech, about the impact of Facebook on democracy, about Google and monopolies, about privacy and Apple, about taxes in Silicon Valley. So these are major issues, central issues. How can we make sure that we fix this stuff? The first thing I come up with, so I have 5 sort of themes in the book, 5 pots, 5 principles, 5 strategies, but I have a kind of a meta strategy too, which is agency. What I argue in the book, and some of you are familiar with some of the books about AI, and there's a really pessimistic strain, people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates, who believe that we really are screwed as a species because this algorithm, this IoT world we're creating will eventually generate algorithms that are conscious, that will think for themselves. And then so IoT or AI, this is our last invention because afterwards we'll become enslaved by smart technology. I don't actually think that's true. In my book, I talk about a woman called Ada Lovelace. She was a 19th century mathematician, the inventor of the very idea of software. She's a remarkable figure, self-taught mathematician, woman, business partner of Charles Babbage, the Victorian inventor of the first physical computer. Lovelace was also the daughter of Lord Byron, so a very romantic background and figure. But what Lovelace reminded people in the mid-19th century, and it's no different today, is that software can't think for itself, that software is invented by us and reflects our values, that software will never be able to be conscious, that software doesn't have goals. And what distinguishes us, and this is where we can define humanity, because when you use this word, you need to know what you're talking about. You can't just use it in a kind of woolly, misty, romantic way. You need to define what you mean by humanity. Humanity is having agency, is being able to be creative. It's going beyond the algorithm. It's thinking for ourselves and acting for ourselves and having goals. So, agency is giving this kind of speech. An algorithm could never give this kind of speech, fortunately, for the algorithm. Agency, then, is the thing we need to remind ourselves of. And, of course, it's particularly important in the age of AI because we are creating technology that is replicating us in many ways. Technology that will be able to drive. Technology that will be able to analyze medical problems and legal problems and build bridges and build software. So unless we can re-establish or at least establish our human agency in this age of AI, in the age of IoT, we really are screwed. And it's a collective issue. You can't just expect other people to have agency and fix this stuff. So we have a collective responsibility, and agency is the sort of central philosophical theme in my book. So having agency, though, of course, is not enough. We need to direct that agency. We need to focus on stuff. And there are 5 areas I focus on in the book. 5 ways that we need to reimpose our control on the future to make sure that it does indeed become an internet of people rather than internet of things which dominate us. The first, and this is an argument that's more popular in Europe than in the US, is regulation. Regulation matters. The problem with Silicon Valley is it's been for the last 25 or 30 years mostly unregulated. That's resulted not only in a winner-take-all economy of monopolies, but also in an economy where companies have behaved often without much morality, maybe not in an evil way, but certainly in an irresponsible way. So what's happening in Europe now is a good beginning. We have GDPR. We have an attempt to give data back to the people. We have Margaret Vestager, who I interviewed for my book, who is really standing up to these winner-take-all leviathans, forcing Apple to pay taxes when it never did, fining them $14 billion, the biggest fine ever paid by a company. She's launching antitrust investigations of Facebook, of Google. She's fining Facebook for every data intrusion and every time people publish garbage and illegal and hateful stuff on the platform. So regulation matters. Innovation matters too. I was encouraged by some of the entrepreneurs earlier who have interesting new companies. What Margaret Vestager is doing is creating a level playing field for new companies. The problem at the moment in Silicon Valley are there are dominant business models, the so-called free model, the model peddled by Facebook and Google, which are models which are deeply exploitative of consumers. We all know the model of using Google and Facebook for free, but becoming their product because they acquire our data and therefore mine us, destroy our privacy, and become extremely rich and powerful at the same time. So we need new business models, new thoughtful, innovative business models that haven't been tried before, that are reflectful of people, that are respectful of people, that realize, and I disagree with one of the people earlier who said millennials don't care about giving away their privacy. I think that's absolutely wrong. I think millennials care actually more than my generation. And it's millennials who are embracing physical stuff. It's millennials now who are fleeing from Facebook. It's millennials who will ultimately challenge many of the business practices of Silicon Valley. So I think this is a great time to be coming out with new businesses, new platforms, new products that challenge the orthodoxies, the unthinking orthodoxies of Silicon Valley. And indeed, in 20, 25 years, I don't think, Google and Facebook may be around, but I don't think their business models be around. I think that the business model of free is profoundly flawed. So we have regulation, we have innovation. We have also three other things. The third is consumer power. Consumers need to articulate their interests much more aggressively. I show historically this has been done in the food and the automotive industry. At the moment, consumers are being exploited mostly by these new technology companies. So consumers need to act more aggressively as well. And as I said earlier, one of the things we're beginning to see is the way in which Facebook, for example, is being challenged by its users. We need citizen engagement being the most sort of essential part of agency, the ability to fight the lies, to enlighten, to make sure that the so-called sharing companies like Uber actually respect their workers, to make sure that Amazon doesn't pioneer such an extreme sort of surveillance business that everyone is going to be watched all the time, to make sure again that Amazon workers are properly paid. So we can all work as citizens. And finally, we need education. I think this is the key thing. As I suggested earlier, it's one of the great ironies that in our tech-saturated world, the thing that is trending is humanity. In a world where the algorithm is becoming more and more dominant and ubiquitous, and that's inevitable for better or worse. I can't stop any of this. I'm certainly not a Luddite. I'm not in favor of destroying our machines. One of the ironies of this is that it's making us realize the value of the human. More importantly, it's creating economic value for humanity, because what technology does is commodify the copy and in many respects commodify the algorithm. So what's valuable in this ubiquitous world of the algorithm is the one thing that the algorithm can't do. What can't the algorithm do? What did I just tell you? The algorithm doesn't have agency. The algorithm can't think for itself. So that's the business we need to be in collectively as a species. That's the business that you guys need to be in, which many of you sound as if you are getting into. And that, above all else, is the business that we need to train our new generations. That is the core issue of education. The old education system was premised on creating industrial man, top-down man, creating essentially machines, because we needed machines in this new world. In the industrial world, we needed people able to calculate. We didn't have computers. We didn't have the algorithm. In the 21st century, the new reality is that we need humans not to conform, not to be orthodox, not to obey, but to think for themselves, to be creative, to do the very things that the algorithm can't do, to be able to talk to one another, to be able to empathize, to be able to be creative. And that's why we need, and this is how I end my book, and this is how I'm ending this speech, that's why we need radical innovation in education. My final chapter focuses on new kinds of educational movements from Montessori and Waldorf, which are bringing out the human, which are developing quite literally the muscle of humanity, of creativity in young people. So that's the future. If the future is indeed going to be truly federated, if the future is going to be better, the moment the future is broken. But if we're going to fix the future, and that's the title of my book, How to Fix the Future, then we need to go to the core, to the foundations. It's not going to come from a technology. There is no solution to the future through technology. If someone gets on this stage and tells you, well, we'll all fix it with Bitcoin, that's garbage, that's bollocks. Because we've heard that one time and time before. Oh, the internet will fix this, or social media will fix this, or AI will fix this, or IoT will fix this, or Bitcoin will fix this, or augmented reality will fix this, or virtual reality will fix this. There's only one thing that will fix the future, and that's you and I. Thank you.
Almost done. You have got a couple of minutes?
Yeah, sure, for you.
Thank you. Do you like this? Was it comfortable?
Yeah. I always like to hide behind someone so people can't see my private parts.
Oh, they're okay.
They can on that side.
And you want to look in their private parts to put the lights on. I want to thank you for a great speech.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Most of all, I want to thank you for
And you put the music off.
We liked it.
Who liked the music?
Yay!
Who didn't like the music? See,
they're friends and family, you know?
It's like being in a massage parlor. Not that, of course, I've ever been in a massage parlor. But
what I liked about your book is we're in this roller coaster that we call work and family and doing stuff. And there is not much time to reflect on what you're doing. And we were on a business trip in London, and we were talking about Internet of People, and we came back home, and I was looking into the program of the next web conference. And there you were in the lineup. And I never heard of you, I'm sorry. With this, who is this Andrew Keane guy? And I looked you up, and I saw you wrote a new book. Yeah. And I opened the first chapter, and it said, Internet of People. And we were working on this. And it was just so obvious that we had to ask you to come over here. And we're grateful for that.
Well, thank you.
And we did that through LinkedIn, a platform.
Yeah, so your point is, well, you've criticized technology, and while you're on LinkedIn and you're on Twitter and blah, blah, right? Is that your point?
No, my point is we're...
Very original. I've never heard that one before.
We're addictive. But sometimes it's got to...
No, it can be good. Look, that's the point about all this tech stuff. And when I came out with, particularly with Cult of the Amateur in 2007, maybe I was a little giddy of this, that we've got to avoid falling into either the Luddite or the sort of digital utopian camp. It's all too easy to either be positioned as someone who's completely against technology or for technology. And the reality is that we're all for both. We all use it. We are all dependent on it. But I think everyone here is slightly ambivalent, maybe because their kids are addicted, maybe because it's bothering them too much, maybe because they're scared of these huge companies. So, yeah, this technology, look, LinkedIn is great in some ways, although there's something creepy about LinkedIn. And again, it seems to know me better than I know myself in suggesting people I should connect with, people I'd completely forgotten about in my life, but who they seem to remember, and I don't know how they figure that out. Is anyone from LinkedIn here? I mean, Reid Hoffman's an old friend of mine. I mean, he's certainly an amazing company and a good product, but it is creepy how much these platforms know about me without me telling them stuff. And I told people that about LinkedIn. I said, it's really, I don't know how they know that I should be connecting with this person who I hadn't thought about for 30 years, but actually could be kind of interesting. And they said, well, you didn't switch this off or that off in the controls. And that's why things like GDPR are important, because it's forcing these companies to be more accountable. because they're so clever and they're so sophisticated and they come up with these interfaces which are so confusing that most of us just tick the box and move on and then regret it afterwards.
But what happened? I buy your book.
At least you bought it.
The
right?
analog version, you know? Yeah. With the cover, blue, with a great tagline. How can we help people within the digital world? Am I correct? I think it was. And I start reading. And I switched off my phone. There was no television. I had some music on. I like music. Not that. I loved it. And it got me in this thinking space, actually what you're referring to. Yeah. I was actually absorbing your words, chapters, and absorbing the story. And it opened up my eyes that we're so connected every day with all this stuff that we're not really thinking anymore. Of course, I do have to think every day, but think in layers and really understand what you're saying. And I really like that. I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. No, I think, but you know, you could have read it online. I mean, you could have bought it in digital form and read it on your.
I did. I bought Kindle. I bought 80 books analog version.
So you know, the analog is not the only way to go. You can still have interesting ideas in digital form. I think it's what's interesting though about the book, and what's interesting maybe about these kind of events. And again, this is the reminder of why humanity not only matters but has value, is that the book has actually been strengthened ultimately by digital. Everyone thought that the e-book would take off, and it's actually been a huge disappointment for the publishing industry. It's why vinyl records now are very popular. In fact, the music business makes a lot more money through the sale of vinyls than it does through subscription services. So what it all reminds us is that the analog, the physical, has enormous value in the digital age. And that's why events like this, you could have done this online, but the physical experience of looking one another in the eye and being in the same place is immeasurable. So again, the gentleman who said you're going to have the convergence of physical and digital worlds is absolutely, without wishing to be too rude, is absolutely wrong. If anything, we're having the disconnection between the physical and the digital world. And it's the physical where the real value will be in the 21st century. That's what you guys should be working on. Not only is there value in sort of philosophical, ethical terms, but value in economic terms as well.
In your book, you have these...
My physical book, right?
Well, both.
Yeah.
Which book? I will talk about the analog version. You have all these thought leaders that you put into Team Human. And this is my final question for you. Yeah. How do we get into that team? How do we become part of Team Human?
That's a great question. And to be fair, Team Human is not my term. It's thought up by Douglas Rushkoff, another kind of tech like me, someone who originally believed in it and now is much more skeptical. I think that's a really good question, and that's the core issue about agency. We can do it in so many different ways. As I said, as a parent, we can do it by making sure that our kids use these devices responsibly. As entrepreneurs, we can do it by coming up with products that aren't exploitive of people, that aren't destroying, wrecking their privacy, that aren't tricking people, that aren't really seducing them. As voters, we can do it. We can go, you know, we can support people like Margaret Vestager, who's willing to take on the tech titans and make a more balanced playing field. As teachers and writers, we can do it by exposing this stuff, by talking about it. And as just general consumers, we can do it by not becoming completely seduced, addicted to these new worlds, these new devices and technologies. Ultimately, this being human can't be, or becoming, as you say, part of Team Human, it can't be handed down to us. It can't be given to us. Well, I'm certainly not in favor of some sort of general committee of the humans, some Stalin-like solution. So we're all responsible. Just as, and this is not the first time this has happened. We as a generation are on the sort of, we're going through the birth pains of a new world, and it's quite dramatic and quite disruptive and disconcerting. But it happened in the middle of the 19th century with the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution undermined many of the, what was seen at least at the time as being kind of eternal truths of ways of life, of values, of doing things. So I think perhaps if there's one final remark and one way of learning how to be team human, it's by thinking not about the future, but about the past, thinking historically. Reading some history, reading some histories of the Industrial Revolution. My work tends to be quite historical, although I'm not a historian. But reminding us that we've been through this before, and indeed, as I said, the anchor of my book focuses on agency, but the kind of thematic anchor of the book is I go back to 500 years to Thomas More, the author of the Utopia, one of the first books to talk about fixing the future, a book which if you read today is very relevant because he talks about many of the same themes of employment and humanness and equality and fairness that we're focused on today. So be historical. Remember that this is not the first or the last time we as a species will go through this. And so we have a responsibility to remind ourselves that we're part of a narrative, part of a story that's going on, which distinguishes us, which gives our species its uniqueness, not only in the past, but in the future. And if we are to fix the future, we need to think backwards rather than forwards.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
So, wow, what a show. I hoped you enjoyed it as much as I did. Please may I ask to come forward our speakers. Today we got some insights from a technical, a human and social perspective. As for Nalta, we try to inform, to inspire and to entertain you. What about IoT can do for your company? Of course, we have to seek first to understand your business strategy. But we are more than happy to make an appointment to discuss concepts and opportunities. I would like to thank our sponsors, Delbumi, Progress, our panel speakers, our topic speakers, Hans Timmerman, Michael Morton and Andrew Keane. I would thank to our band, Airtime. Wow, I think it was amazing what you guys did, and it was live on stage. And last but not least, thanks, Mike, for your organizing this event. I know it was a hell of a job to fix it, but you surpassed yourself by achieving this level. Wow.
Fix it.
But most of all, thank you. Thank you, our YouTube viewers, for attending this event. In a few minutes, the band Het Noodhoven Trio will start, to the left. Drinks and Dutch bitterballs will be served. Don't forget, when leaving you will receive a compact disc, The Internet of People. It's our second generation music record after the LP from 2 years ago. It's from our band Airtime. And of course, the free ticket to leave the parking. See you next time.